Evening, everybody. A very warm welcome to our webinar on behavioral intelligence, leading with intent. My name is Sameera Ahmed. I am the CEO of Pinnacle skills to build your behavioral intelligence data bank to create high performance. You will be introduced to tools that will enable you to enhance your awareness of self and others and elevate your ability to self-regulate to achieve next level results. Before I hand you over to our esteemed panelists, there are just a few logistical mentions. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Zoom, you will see a Q&A as well as a chat functionality in your taskbar. Please feel free to pop any questions into the Q&A box. We'll answer them throughout the session. We'd also love to hear what your key learnings and insights are, so please pop dependent on your bandwidth capability. Request that you complete this poll and your needs for future sessions. There's also a self-evaluation assessment that would have been sent to you via email, which we would really love for you to complete before tomorrow, because this will be debriefed in tomorrow's session. If you haven't received this assessment, please send an email to digital@regent.ac.za, and the team there will send the assessment back to you. Only qualify for a certificate of attendance if you've attended both sessions for the duration of the program. You're also required to submit a certified copy of your ID and passport to farzana.kareem@regent.ac.za completion of the program. Your attendance will be recorded via your email login and duration per session, so please ensure that this is the same for both days. I did see in the Q&A section come through that some people are experiencing load shedding. So if this is an issue, please get in touch with the region team and they will be able to assist you from there. And now it's the moment you've all been waiting for. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our panelists for tonight, Kyle Chetty and Taffy Mukeredzi. Kyle has over 10 years of experience in the HR industry. He's currently an HR executive and a certified Gallup coach. Kyle recently won the Young CHRO of the Year Award for 2020 and was a finalist in the Future of HR Awards for HR Director of the Year and Best HR Strategy. People have also named him one of the top 100 most inspirational leaders for 2021. Taffy, or Taffy as he is more affectionately known, has over 15 years of leadership experience in manufacturing, consulting, and technology. He is a qualified industrial engineer and holds an MBA. He's currently completing his research for an MCOM in Information Systems and Technology, and in his current role, Taffy is responsible for guiding the technological transition into the digital era as the company is propelled into the fourth industrial revolution. With that said, Kyle, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sam, for that introduction, and welcome to everybody to the session. Glad you could have joined us. If it's the first time you've joined us, welcome. If you have been to one of our webinars before, thank you for joining us again. We hope that you are enjoying our sessions. We are going to talk today about behavioral intelligence and its impact on leadership. I'm going to share with you some tips and information. So I'm going to share my screen now. If you can see it, just let me know. Perfect. I am going to turn off my video due to bandwidth, but I will definitely turn it back on. Can you guys see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, guys. So behavioral intelligence and its impact on leadership. Just going to go over the agenda for day one with you. So some of the topics that we are going to cover today is what is behavioral intelligence? We're going to cover the EPIC framework. We're going to talk about the journey that begins with you. And in that, we're going to cover a Johari window and understanding your strengths to lead. We're then going to look at the ABCDE of managing emotions and the inner compass. We're going to look at interpersonal relationships, empathy, deep listening, social styles, and positive acknowledgements. So we've got a full day packed, and I hope you're ready for this. Don't forget, as Sameera mentioned, there is a session tomorrow as well. And we're going to do a recap of day one. And then we're going to talk about some really interesting stuff, which is the heart of change, the change journey, developing resilience, aspect of a resilient leader, the three circles, the inner compass, building resilience, mind and energy. And as Sam mentioned, we're going to go over the pre-work of one of a self-evaluation that you would have completed. If you did not receive it, it's okay. Um, Someone is going to put the email address on the chat functionality. You can send an email to them. I think it's digital@region.ac.za, where they will give you the assessment and you can complete it. It's a quick assessment and we'll go through it um, tomorrow. All right, so let's look at behavioral intelligence. Now, many of you may have heard this term, or what you would have heard is that word emotional intelligence. Now, emotional intelligence has been widely used in a business and organizational context. And psychologists have been researching alternative types of intelligence for over 100 years. Increasingly, individuals and leaders have become aware that high performance requires a combination of your head and your heart. Now, emotional intelligence is defined as the ability to monitor one's own and others' feelings of emotions and to discriminate amongst them, to use this information to actually guide one's thinking and action. What is behavioral intelligence? Well, behavioral intelligence is the application of skills and abilities to accurately explain existing behaviors. It's able to predict the future, influence other people's behaviors, and control your own behavior. Now, the four easy ways to remember these categories is EPIC: explain, predict, influence, and control. Now, we use this to establish an internal and external awareness of behavioral meaning. At the same time, coupled with a framework for internal and external behavior, as well as modification strategies. Now, let's take a look at each of these categories and how they can actually interact to establish behavioral intelligence as a means for growth and development. So, what you see in front of you is the EPIC framework. Now, if we look at the first block, which is around explain, and this category is the base level and supports all of the other categories. Now, EPIC has the ability to accurately explain behavior that is complex. Now, there are a number of factors that drive behavior, such as emotions, which is why behavioral intelligence and emotional intelligence are related with each other. We're also looking at um, brain functions, genetics, culture, environment, and motivational drivers, just to name a few on this. Now, awareness of these and other factors of the framework for understanding, but we still have to collect information to apply the knowledge. And this is where observation of a particular body language, cues, listening to speech patterns, analyzing behavior for a digital source, and other mining tools actually come into play. Now, though, you know, humans and technology is sort of integrating now, and we're looking at the industrial revolution, we can definitely discern a variety of different behaviors that we use to predict the future. And it also helps us to predict our future behaviors, our influence on other people, and how we actually can control our behaviors. If we're looking at predict, now this category actually relies on patterns of behaviors, that habit formation, or what we call applying the base level explanations to a process that actually gives us insight to the future and to our future actions. Now, though these skills and abilities, or what we call future behaviors, are often sometimes predictable, it's important to remember that, in fact, humans have a built-in capacity to make these decisions naturally. Now, with the help of behavioral intelligence, it can actually get scary how accurate we can be in our prediction models. So a simple example, if you know that your colleague suffers maybe from a low self-esteem and lashes out, when his ego is under attack, you can always anticipate his reaction when the new hire begins to threaten his standing within the company. Now, you can predict what will happen. You can insert an influence mechanism to mitigate the harmful effects of his response. And it's important to remember that predictions such as these are useful in businesses in forecasting the impact of organizational changes, hiring results, leadership potential, and consumer behavior. Now, it's important to remember one thing. Sometimes as humans, we can act outside of the behavioral norms and be completely unpredictable. Now, in these sort of cases, we sort of autopsy a failed prediction to see newly visible markers or alternative behavior, is what we like to call them. That it's something that we've not experienced before, and we use this to actually help redefine the future of predictions and models. Now, when we're looking at influence, this is where we really become masters of persuasion. We sometimes say salespeople, and people that are good at negotiation are good at influencing other people by making a decision. Now, by understanding the geniuses of these people's behavior and being able to explain what drives them, we can employ an influence tactic that truly gets into the inner fibers of their very being. Now, when we are matching a well-structured communication message to the intrinsic drive of another person, it is incredibly effective at delivering positive results. Now, we're using these foundations of rhetorical communication, theories, influence, and so forth, and practical applications of a method of persuasion. But we can see how behavioral intelligence actually sets the stage for influence to not only be effective, but faster in its application. And I'm going to share an example with you now on how an application that many of us are using actually predicts our behavior. But while influence strategies are particularly sensitive to ethical application of persuasion, as the friendly neighborhood said, Spider-Man once said, with great power comes great responsibility. These tools are not to be taken lightly and should be employed with an ethical approach. You should be able to influence quickly, because sometimes when you influence too quickly, though, it can be seen as manipulation, and especially when it goes in the wrong hands. So it's important that although we're using behavioral intelligence quickly, we need to make sure that we're using the power wisely of this. And when we're talking about control, this is the real power of behavior intelligence, because now we've got the information of how we actually want to control our message. How do we want to control our emotions? How do we actually want to control some of the habits that we have to actually determine success or failure? We need to remember something. Behavior is a choice. How we choose to act and react to internal and external has consequences. Now, while we're doing this, you know, some of these consequences are sometimes positive in nature, while some of them could be very harmful in nature. And utilizing methods such as maybe a limbic reaction management strategy, many of us use meditation. People can use self awareness tools that sort of helps us to explain our behavioral triggers and gives us cues. And by doing this, we can actually become the master of our own destinies. If we can explain why we're engaging in certain behaviors, if we can predict how we react to certain situations, then we can adapt and transform our behaviors. And this is growing our behavioral intelligence. Um, like I mentioned, one of the examples that I wanted to use around behavioral intelligence is actually Facebook. If any one of you has Facebook, you'll start noticing that when you sometimes go to another city, like for example, a few months ago, I went to Cape Town. Um, Flew to Cape Town. I was there for work. A few days later, while I was there, sorry, a few hours later, I went onto my phone and I started seeing all these advertisements for Cape Town around places to eat. What's the recommended places? Do I need to do some shopping, dry cleaning? It even picked up the hotel that I was staying in. And it showed me some of those adverts which were sponsored. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. How did it know where I was? And what they're using is they're using the location of your phone to track you. But at the same time, they're looking at things like what you search for, where you're going, what's interesting you, and they're patterning that behavior that you use on your phone to actually promote and sponsor things on your page. And they're using this technology quite intensely to actually gain market share. Now, I'm going to go a little bit theoretical with you because this is an MDP process, but what I am going to do is try and explain this to you in a few words. So, in school, we probably learned about our cognitive ability, and this is the ability where all our emotions, decision making, and all of those things go through. But emotional intelligence is not determined and fixed in our mid-teen years. So this is not something that you learn in school. This is not something that you learn by the time you're 7 years old and you now have to explain this. All right. The individual building blocks of emotional intelligence grows on us all the time, and it can actually be improved the more we work on it. Now, individuals can start taking responsibility for understanding and managing their emotions and combining these with logical thought through processes to actually ensure greater effectiveness. Now, this really starts in the journey of change. And in order to understand the impact of our emotions from a logical perspective and the performance, it is necessary to understand the basic architecture of our brain, and in particular, the role of the amygdala. Now, when we're perceiving danger, the amygdala, in essence, hijacks all other advanced brain processes that is going through our head. Okay, so it's processing all of this information, and it's sort of resulting in what we call the fast and sloppy emotions. Now, this primal emotion or unthinking response can be illustrated to you, and you can see it in there. And it's around point number 4, where you see the amygdala does a quick threat assessment. So your body is now doing a quick assessment, and it's using both, um, limbic as well as the amygdala, and it's now looking at your sort of brain system, what we call the neurocritical system. Um, and it's looking for the functionality, and it's working the connections between these components, and a combination as well of your head and your heart. It's looking at what you're feeling, what you're thinking, and this is critical for optimal effectiveness, both in work and at life. But the intelligent use of our emotions leverages the power of both sides of the brain, rational and emotional. So now our brain is telling us to develop emotional intelligence and to use our emotional intelligence, which is a real powerful combination. We need to start using both sides of our brain. We need to look at what is the right decision, and am I being too emotional about it? And that is why sometimes, when you're making decisions and you're thinking and you're pondering about this, a few times, you often will then ask yourself, ooh, am I making this decision properly? Am I being too emotional about this decision? Am I reasonable about this? And those are the thoughts that's going through your head, and you're using your emotional intelligence to actually help make decisions better. All right, I'm going to show you a little video. If you, as old as me, you would probably remember Seinfeld. I think it used to play on SABC1 at 7:30, and then moved to, I think, SABC3. And then it used to be on D's TV before. But this is a very short video clip. Please be mindful that depending on your internet connection and your bandwidth, you may see the video and it may freeze. You may only hear the sound. Some of you may not hear the sound, but you'll see the video. I do apologize, but that's about your bandwidth. But here goes.
Speaking of having it all, where were you?
I went to the beach.
Oh, the beach.
It's not working, Jerry. It's just not working.
What is it that isn't working?
Why did it all turn out like this for me? I had so much promise. I was personable. I was bright. Oh, maybe not academically speaking, but I was perceptive. I always know when someone's uncomfortable at a party.
Got knocking over there?
It all became very clear to me sitting out there today that every decision I've ever made in my entire life has been wrong. My life is the complete opposite of everything I want it to be. Every instinct I have in every aspect of life, be it something to wear, something to eat, it's all been wrong. Everywhere.
Tuna on toast, coleslaw, cup of coffee.
Yeah. No, wait a minute. I always have tuna on toast. Nothing's ever worked out for me with tuna on toast. I want the complete opposite of tuna on toast. Chicken salad on rye, untoasted, with a side of potato salad and a cup of tea.
Well, there's no telling what can happen from this.
You know, chicken salad's not the opposite of tuna. Salmon's the opposite of tuna, because salmon swim against the current, and the tuna swim with it.
Good for the tuna.
George, you know that woman just looked at you.
So what? What am I supposed to do?
Go talk to her.
Elaine, bald men with no jobs and no money who live with their parents don't approach strange women.
Well, here's your chance to try the opposite. Instead of tuna salad and being intimidated by women, chicken salad and going right up to them.
Yeah, I should do the opposite. I should.
If every instinct you have is wrong, then the opposite would have to be right.
Yes. I will do the opposite. I used to sit here and do nothing and regret it for the rest of the day. So now I will do the opposite, and I will do something. Excuse me, I couldn't help but notice that you were looking in my direction.
Oh, yes, I was. You just ordered the same exact lunch as me.
My name is George. I'm unemployed and I live with my parents.
I'm Victoria. Hi. What are we gonna do? Should we just move?
It won't be necessary.
Shut your trap and stop kicking the seats! We're trying to watch the movie! And if I have to tell you again, we're gonna take it outside and I'm gonna show you what it's like! You understand me?
Now shut your mouths or I'll shut them for you. And if you think I'm kidding, just try me. Try me. Because I would love it! Hey, I just found $20! I tell you this, something is happening in my life. I did this opposite thing last night. Up was down, black was white, good was
Bad.
day was
Nice.
Yes!
So you just did the opposite of everything.
Yes! And listen to this. Listen to this. Her uncle works for the Yankees and is going to get me a job interview. A front office kind of thing. Assistant to the traveling secretary. A job with the New York Yankees. This has been the dream of my life ever since I was a child. And it's all happening because I'm completely ignoring every urge towards common sense and good judgment I've ever had. This is no longer just some crazy notion, Elaine, Jerry. This is my religion.
Well, I guess your Messiah would be the Antichrist.
Come on, let's go.
You are the complete opposite of every applicant we've seen. Mr. Steinbrenner, sir. There's someone here I'd like you to meet. This is Mr. Costanza. He's one of the applicants.
Nice to meet you.
Well, I wish I could say the same, but I must say, with all due respect, I find it very hard to see the logic behind some of the moves you have made with this fine organization. In the past 20 years, you have caused myself and the city of New York a good deal of distress, as we have watched you take our beloved Yankees and reduce them to a laughingstock, all for the glorification of your massive ego.
Hire this man.
All right, so to unpack a little bit of this video, in terms of your emotional awareness, your behaviors, and how it actually impacts you. If you remember in the video, he was talking about a salad and so forth, and it was around trying something of the opposite. So trying something different than what you're normally used to. I was reading somewhere that it says whenever you're going to a specific place, let's say you're going to a meeting room or a training session, or you have to go and sit somewhere. We are creatures of habit. So if we normally sit at the end of the table, every time we go to that room or a training session or wherever the case may be, we will always sit in that spot. But we actually challenge our mind and our brain to start thinking differently if we sit somewhere else. Now, part of this video, you'll also see that he changed his response to his normal behavior. When he walked in, he wasn't very confident about himself, but he built his confidence through his behavior, through changing how he reacts to his emotions. I mean, he approached the lady, he stood up to those intimidating guys in the movie theater, from a job interview perspective. And all this was due to him understanding his emotions and understanding his behavior and actually being self-aware. So I'm going to share with you another video quickly, but being self-aware is the key to developing emotional intelligence. And in addition to developing self-awareness, it is a lifelong process. It begins with you being aware of who you are and what you are like. How self-aware are you? Do you have an accurate picture of how others see you? Are you in touch with your motives and underlying needs at any given time? And the irony is that people may believe that they are self-aware when they actually are not. I'm going to share with you a quick video. Again, it may impact your bandwidth. Depending on your bandwidth, it may freeze or you may only hear parts of it. Right. And from what we see in your video, it's so important to be self-aware of your emotions. It's around understanding your emotions and understanding the behavior that attaches to your emotions. Now, being able to sort of differentiate, label, and describe your emotions, you know, being sort of experienced in terms of this actually enables you to communicate better. You're able to analyze yourself, and furthermore, you are also sorry, and you're also able to clarify the impact um, of emotions and ultimately to control your emotions more effectively. At the same time, it helps you to be more self-aware. Now, self-awareness assists in identifying the actions that are needed to behave completely or sort of competently in different situations. Now, the more self-aware you are, the more you are able to control your behavior, and the greater is your ability to actually adapt your behavior to changing circumstances. Now, an important tool in increasing your self awareness is that of the Johari window, and we're going to talk about that just now. Now, the journey begins with you. And organizations historically have based employee development on identifying and fixing people's weaknesses. Managers, probably more than any other group, realize that this is true. Many managers have sat down to write a performance review for an employee, and no matter how outstanding the employee's performance was, they have felt obligated to find areas of improvement to include in their feedback. In this way, employees have become conditioned to regard development and performance improvement as an endless cycle of finding and fixing weaknesses. Now, this conditioning actually colors our employees' engagement in our development programs that we have in our organizations. In fact, the entire experience with the organization is impacted by this. Now, it is little wonder um, then that strengths-based development comes as a welcoming and a refreshing relief to employees in most organizations. Now, Gallup research has shown us that developing people's strengths actually leads to significant increases in performance. Along with this, the greater engagement and well-being and business results. But as organizations move to become strength-based, the question lingers for many in terms of, if we choose to focus on our strengths, does this mean we are ignoring our weaknesses? That's a good question, but with important ramifications of how we are as leaders and managers. It's around develop employees and manage their performance. Weaknesses are not excused or worse ignored in strengths-based organizations. Rather, strengths-based approach to development, is to define, understand, and address weaknesses in the context of stress. Now, you're probably hearing me talk about the strengths and weakness, and you want to know, what is a weakness and how do we approach it? Well, in strengths-based organizations, development begins with the identification of strengths rather than weaknesses. Learning activities are then directed at helping the employee develop those strengths and actually apply them with increased efficiencies. But any discussion of a person's strengths is not complete without a discussion of the person's weaknesses. Like light and darkness, you can't distinguish one without the other. Weaknesses are a natural and integrated part of any development conversation about strengths. Now, Gallup defines a weakness as anything that gets in the way of your success. Sometimes we call these derailers. Now, derailers is some sort of parlance of leadership development. Weaknesses are the specific behaviors that prevent people from realizing the full impact and return on the expression of their strengths. So, identifying your strengths is as important as identifying your weaknesses. But don't be mistaken. There is no such thing as fixing a weakness. You can manage a weakness. You can't truly fix your weakness. Employees simply need to be aware of their weaknesses, take responsibility for them, and then use their strengths to manage them. Now, it begins with self-awareness. Confronting your weaknesses is a lot easier to handle when the spotlight is on another person, because not many of us would like to say, "This is my weakness." Issues of self-awareness that people commonly struggle with includes, sometimes we claim strengths that we don't actually possess. We say we are, very good at timekeeping, but in fact, we're always late. We fail to see our own weaknesses and the impact of those weaknesses that we have. We become very sort of defensive and self-protective around weaknesses or non-talents that we have. And when we are viewing the areas of weaknesses as more valuable or important to develop than expressing our area of strength, we often lack the self-awareness about our weaknesses because we are so sensitive to negative feedback. And this is especially true for managers and leaders or high performing employees that we have who have this sort of high self assurance and outstanding track record that sort of makes them less inclined to see what they are doing is not working. But interestingly, we find that as people develop greater awareness and ownership of their strengths, they are more transparent and able to be forthcoming with their weaknesses. Now, as people invest more in their strengths and they choose strengths to become more consequential, they are more inclined to exchange being well rounded for being extraordinary. Now, the next step after awareness is taking responsibility for our weakness now. Responsibility is essential to any meaningful change. Just as how, an employee must own their strength, we need to also own our weaknesses, particularly the impact of those weaknesses on others. We need to take responsibility that can be associated with blame, fault finding, and can be seen as an admission of guilt. In in truth, it's the most powerful move for anyone, leaders, managers, high performing employees, anyone, to actually acknowledge what they see and the impact they are having, and they are able to actually demonstrate this willingness to be accountable for it. I don't know how you feel, but definitely when I know that someone is making a mistake or when they're not good at something, the fact that they own up and they say, "You know what, I'm not good at this. This is not my strong point. Can you help me?" You sort of develop a new sort of respect for this person. Now, it will be obvious to some that they need to take responsibility for the impact of their weakness after becoming aware of them, but others may resist taking responsibility. And instead, we see them shift the blame to circumstances or they shift the blame to other people. What we found is that having a coach that can gently help employees who take responsibility for who actually take responsibility, and some of them resist this, can actually sort of see other people's perspectives and actually appreciate the impact of their weakness. And we use this to provide a developmental lens that can help employees own their weaknesses. Now, once you are aware of your weaknesses and you've taken responsibility for your weaknesses, you must now use your strengths to manage your weaknesses. Now, this is the real benefit of knowing your strengths. Now, weaknesses can be, meaningfully managed by only means of your strengths. You can't manage a weakness from a defect. A person's natural reservoir of identified talent is the only true resource they have for neutralizing their weakness. Now, once a person has identified their Clifton strengths, which I'm going to show you just now, it is just a simple strategic exercise to think through how you can apply your strengths to manage your weaknesses. So you can ask questions such as, how can you use your competitive nature to be a better listener? Because generally we see that people who are competitive don't like to listen to other people. We can ask ourselves questions of how do we use our relationship strengths to improve the quality of how we execute? How can our talent for analytical thinking help influence others? And we can go on with some of these questions about our strengths. But it's important to remember that by leveraging our natural talents and strengths, they are able to better equip and manage and actually compensate for our weaknesses. Now, managing weaknesses is another demonstration of the power of strengths. Weaknesses is an integral part of strengths-based development, but weaknesses will never develop into strengths. Now, I'm going to show you my strengths profile in a bit. Should be here. Here we go. So I'm going to talk you through this just now. So it will give you a better sort of context of what I'm talking about in terms of strengths, weaknesses, and I've used myself as a live example because I own my weaknesses, and we'll go through some of them and post your questions if you have any, and we can answer them on how I deal with my weaknesses and how do I use my strengths to overcome this. But one of the other ways that you can actually use to sort of create self-awareness is the Johari window. And many of you have may use this before. You may have heard of this in other management training programs. And the Johari window model is a simple and useful tool for illustrating and improving self-awareness and mutual understanding between individuals in a group. Now, this model was developed by an American psychologist. I think his name is Joseph Lift. And I think the other guy was Harry. I can't remember his last name, but this model actually represents information, feelings, experiences, views, attitude, skills, intentions, motivation, um, within or about another person. And this is in relation to sort of form, for perspective, which I'm going to talk to you about now. So what we call it as the four panes of the Johari window. So what you'll see on your left hand side is what's known to others and unknown to others, and on the top you'll see what's known to ourselves and unknown to ourselves. And we break this into sort of four quadrants or four blocks. So what is known to others and known to self is what we call open. Now these are things that are known to you and also seen and acknowledged by others. Then we have something called what is known to ourselves and unknown to others, which is called hidden because only we know about it. Okay. When we start looking at unknown to self and known to others, this is what we call the blind, or some people refer to it as the blind spot. Things that are unknown by you, but it's seen and acknowledged by others. The next is what we call the unknown. And these things are unknown by both you and also by others. And I'm going to go through an example of this, but I think this is it's a good tool if you're unable to do the strengths assessment. You can always Google and download a Johari window that, exercise that you can do. You can get your family members to participate with you as well through this. But I'm going to talk to you about how the Johari window works, in an individual or team. And in this instance, sort of there are two factors at work within the Johari window. The first factor is what is known to you about yourself. And this relates to, what other people know about you. And you'll see it's called the open free area, like we discussed. Now, in this quadrants, anything you know about yourself and you are willing to share is actually part of your open area. If you are not willing to share it, it then becomes self-disclosure. So it moves into your hidden area. Okay. If we move on to aspects that you do not know about you, but others within the group or in your team is aware of, then this becomes in your blind area. And you can use this sort of for feedback. Okay, so while the help of feedback from others can help you become aware of some of your positive and negative traits as perceived by others, you can also overcome some of your personal issues that you may be having that you didn't know that those were the triggers for. There are also aspects about yourself that you are aware of that you might not want others to know, which is what we disclose as your hidden area. And this is where it stays with you, and you need to be comfortable enough to know when do you want to share this. The unknown area is really when you take the quadrants of 1, 2, and 3 and put them together, where you're looking at the self-discovery, you're looking at the shared discovery, you're looking at other people's observations, and you're taking this into your unknown area. Now, the balance between the four quadrants can change. Like you see, there's a little red line there. It's not center all the time. This can change. You might want to tell someone an aspect of your life that you had previously kept hidden. For example, maybe you're not comfortable contributing ideas with large groups. This would actually increase your open area and decrease your hidden area. Okay, it is also possible to increase your open area by asking for feedback from people. When feedback is given to you honestly, you can actually reduce the size of your blind area. Maybe you interrupt people before they have finished making their point or finished talking, which can sometimes cause frustration. But once you have this information, you can then know what it takes to actually be a good listener. Okay, and sometimes we don't realize these small pain points that we cause other people. And by working with others, it is actually possible for us to discover aspects of this Johari window that we have never sort of maybe even appreciated before, because this is not just known for negative feedback, but it could be used for good feedback. Maybe they want to say, Kyle is a very good listener. And we can use this as an opportunity of encouragement. We can use this, for confidence building. We can use this for training purposes as well. Okay, so it's important that we understand from a practical point that when we're implementing the Johari window, there's two steps. The first one is the place to start in the Johari window is the open area. Okay, so this is where you make some notes about yourself, you complete your self-awareness diagnostics, you do self-assessments, you find out what your strengths and weaknesses are, you identify what you're comfortable and willing to share with others, you try and be honest and clear about what sort of others know about you and what you know about yourself already. Step two, on the other hand, involves other people that ask you for feedback about yourself, that you ask for feedback about yourself, but you are prepared to seriously consider it. Okay, this doesn't mean you have to do everything that's suggested, but you can at least listen to the feedback that's given to you, so you can become more self-aware of yourself, and you can receive this feedback to better yourself. Now, I'm going to show you an example of a Johari window. I hope all of you know who Harry Potter is. So we've done a Johari window for him. We've looked at what is known to self and known to others. So he knows and everybody else knows he's an orphan. His aunt, uncle, and cousin don't like him. His parents died in a car accident. Great. What is known to himself but not known to others, that he always felt mistreated, that he lived under the stairs, that the snake actually talked to him in one of the movies, and his family actually ignores his birthdays. Okay, he doesn't really share that. However, what is not known to himself but known to others was that when he first started the journey, he was a wizard, which he didn't know until he went to school, or the owl started giving him these letters. He who must be not named killed his parents and tried to kill him. Okay. His father was a wizard and seeker. His father also bullied Snape. So these are some of the things that we looked at Harry Potter's character and said, how can we use a Johari window on this? And this is just to give you an example of how a Johari window is. So we were talking a little bit about strengths, and I'm sure you're tired of hearing my voice now, so I'm going to play you a little video.
So if we ask ourselves why self-awareness is critical to leadership, I think we have to start again with the notion of what leadership is. And if we accept that it is a relationship, and within that relationship, it's actually not you who decides whether you're a leader, but it's the followers that make that decision. You can be a manager, you can be put into a box on an org chart by your organization, which makes you responsible for a certain area, which makes you responsible for a number of people that work in your organization. But that doesn't mean that you're a leader. That just makes you a manager that's responsible for a particular part of the business. But the question whether you're a leader is really decided by your followers. They either decide to follow you every day, or they might decide to just comply with what you tell them, or they might decide not even to comply. And that requires you to understand what makes you unique as a person. There's actually Gareth Jones and Rob Goffey, created that one question, which I think is a great one. Why should anyone be led by you? And we also help you to find the answers to it, because the answers lie in your unique strengths, because there's only one person that has a set of strengths like you do. They lie in how you make sense of the world, what you see as your purpose in life. And if you're in touch with that, it's a lot easier for you to create an environment where people around you also can get in touch with their sources of purpose. So people want to be in touch with a real person, they want to know your strengths, but they also want to know what your weaknesses are, you know, and they see them every day, you know, they see them 8 hours a day. So you should also be self-confident enough and self-aware enough that you are open about what these weaknesses are and that you can invite other people in, the people working in your team, you can invite them in to complement you, to make up for your weaknesses, to actually people feel helpful and they feel purposeful if they can actually chip in and make up for your weaknesses as a leader. But it takes courage to actually work with them and not try to ignore them.
All right, so we spoke a lot about strengths, we spoke a lot about weaknesses, and I wanted to really give you a practical example. So I'm putting myself out there to all for a good few hundred people. And this is what we call a Clifton Strengths Report. Now, you can get this, you can get in touch with Sameera, or you can get in touch with Regent, and I'm sure they'll pass on the information. But I've done this for myself in 2019, where I was on this journey to self-discover myself and really understand what is my strengths, what is my weaknesses, and how can I better myself in being a leader. Now, if you look at the left-hand side, it has numbers 1 to 10, and those are actually my strengths. And we're going to explain the different colors just now of what that means. But those things are the talents that comes naturally to me. So those are things that is sort of unconscious. Um, you know, I can do them in my sleep. I'm good at this. I know I'm good at this. And when you start looking where we talk about navigate, um, from number 11 to roughly about 25 is things that does come to me, but I have to dig a little bit deeper to get it. Okay, so it's not something I can do in my sleep, if I may put it that way. Sometimes I disagree with some of them. However, if we look at from number 26 down to 34, this is generally used as development areas, okay, or weaknesses in, excuse me, in that sense. And these are things that I really need to work on. So I was actually quite shocked about this, because when I looked at this, you know, I was like, I'm in HR. I should have empathy. I should have harmony. I couldn't understand this. I always thought I was an empathetic person. But in fact, only after looking at this, I realized that I actually don't. I don't like it when people cry in front of me. In fact, I just want to get them out of my face. But what I actually do is I use some of my strengths, which could be relator and significance, or maybe belief. Um, and I actually use that to substitute and to help build some of my empathy. Okay, so this is just an example of how a strengths profile looks at. And I mean, you can use any strengths profile, but this is the one that I personally wanted to invest in. And this just clearly explains your strengths and weaknesses. However, with this, if you look at strategic, you know, it says I lead with strategic thinking, but the four quadrants is executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. And we're going to explain this here. So when we look at, you know, your strengths, you see, I've got 4 leaders in front of you: leader A, leader B, leader C, leader D, leader E. They all have different strengths, and they all have strengths in different quadrants. Like I mentioned before, there's strategic thinking, there's influence, there's relationship building, and there's execution. So they've all got different strengths. Now, what we often find is that sometimes as managers or as humans, we say we are too task orientated or we are too people orientated. Now, when we're looking at our strengths, we're not putting ourselves into task orientated or people orientated. What we're actually doing is we're looking at our strengths, we're looking at our weaknesses, and we're saying, how can we use our strengths better? How do we not overuse our strengths? And how do we actually help ourselves work on our weaknesses? We know that it's a weakness. It's always going to be there. It's not going to change. I can go on therapy sessions for empathy. That's not going to make me any more empathetic than I am. What it is going to do, however, it's going to help me understand how I deal with empathy and how I can work and build on that weakness to make myself a little bit more comfortable when I'm dealing with that weakness. Now, if we're looking at emotional intelligence, and another tool that we look at is the ABCD of managing emotions. Now, when we're looking at this model is derived from cognitive behavioral coaching, and a lot of people use this. You may have, looked at this if you've ever been on any emotional intelligence course or behavioral management courses and stuff like that. But there's sort of a big misconception that says that in order to sort of, behave correctly, we need to sort of forget our weaknesses. Okay. Now, if we're looking at the A, B, C, D, and E of emotional intelligence, the first one is about activating an event. And this is an external event or situation that most of us blame our problems on. For example, we were not being selected to be the top employee. We were not selected in that certain role, or we often sort of blame other people. Okay. um, so think about when a colleague on where you work with, let's say they're late all the time in delivering a series of projects or information. This might prompt you to feel angry and irritated, and perhaps you can sort of lose it, and you can sabotage your entire relationship with this person because you're angry with them. Okay. So sometimes it's about activating that event and saying, okay, I know this person is late all the time. Okay. If we look at B, and B stands for belief, um, however, sometimes our belief is what tells us about these events, which normally leads us to feel these negative emotions. So I've not been selected, so the coach must be think I'm a bad player, or I wasn't selected to represent my company, so I must be a very bad employee. Okay, and we start thinking and believing all of these negative emotions in this. The next one is around consequence, and this can actually lead to any number of self-defining emotions, depression, anxiety, and so forth. And then in dispute, we're talking about the challenges that arise about belief, which actually involve questioning both rational and irrational thoughts that we have about an activating event. And the next one is the effect, and this is really about gaining new perspectives. We experience sort of cooler, calmer emotions that allows us to think rationally about a situation. And they say, for every action, there's an equal or opposite reaction, meaning that one shouldn't be responsive to the event manifested by the other party, like the colleague being late or whatever the case may be, but rather to actually regulate our emotions, to work with them collaboratively.
We are going to
I'm going to share with you another quick video just on self-awareness and leadership and how it impacts you.
We are going to take a detailed look at self-awareness and leadership. So get something to write with and settle in, because this will be time well spent. Alex Lyon here. I have another video in this series about self-awareness in relationships that I will link to. This week, we'll look at 6 ways to develop more self-awareness for you and your leadership. And the bottom line is that better self-awareness will help you be at your best. I'm going to encourage you to take notes about yourself as we go and get actively involved. But if you want to just listen, then I'll put up a summary at the end of the steps that you can take. So number 1, look at your past job experiences and projects. And the question is, what did you like most about them? And then what did you not enjoy? In his amazing book called Range, David Epstein talks about a concept called match quality. He talks about how we should use our early work experiences to figure out what kind of work matches us best. Epstein says that we shouldn't look back at our past jobs or careers like we've wasted time. He says it's just the opposite. We can use our early work experiences to get clearer on what makes us tick, and that's self-awareness. I'll use two of my earliest jobs. One was as an office worker and one was a teaching assistant. And it really taught me that I love teaching and interacting much more than I like being in an office environment. Teaching had a much better match quality for me. So take note of what your earliest job experiences taught you about yourself. Number 2, make a list of what you believe are your strengths and your weaknesses, but don't answer this like you would for a job interview. Oh, one of my weaknesses is I'm a workaholic. Don't give answers like that. Get real. So in my early job as a teaching assistant, I found one key weakness was detail-oriented work, like proofreading. I was very bad at it when it came to the finest details. I really struggled. But I've gotten better since, but it's still not a strength. And one of my key strengths was setting big picture goals and making a strategy to get there. So I'm good at creating a plan and working that plan. So what are your strengths and your weaknesses?
All right, so we've listened to him identifying our strengths and weaknesses. And, there's practical tips to increase your emotional control and management. And this is really the understanding of the role of the amygdala and the neural cortex in triggering and managing your emotions. And I know we spoke a little bit about this when we did the whole brain activity, and you probably were confused thinking we're doing some neurosurgery. But in order to manage your emotion and increase your emotional control and working with your team better, practice deep breathing. Try using things like a diary or a journal to help with your emotions when you're upset, or write down what has upset you. Find a creative outlook. Maybe some people like writing journals and their days after a long day to help them unwind. People like painting or drawing. Some people like me use humor. Some people take them out. Please drink enough water, and I'm specific about water. But also, some people I know that this works for is when they count backwards from 20, especially when they feel themselves in a very explosive situation. What I'm going to talk to you now, and I'm going to wrap up before I hand over to Taffy, is what we call the inner compass. Now, some people call this the wheel of life. Now, in general, our lives are made up of 8 vital areas. And what I'd like you to do is look at this in your screen and rate each value or each area in terms of your satisfaction with the amount of time that you are currently spending in this area. Now, 10 is sort of, very satisfied, and 0 is, I'm not really satisfied. And once you've done this, and you can Google this, just join some of the points, and it actually helps you to balance your life, to see where you are spending most of your time, where would you like to spend more time. And this inner compass, if you take time to reflect on it, is really a high impact tool to ensure that you focus your time and your energy on areas of your life which you believe are meaningful and have purposeful. And this will actually enable you to set goals and prioritize yourself. And with that being said, I would like to thank you for that. I'm now going to hand you over to Taffy, who's going to share some really exciting stuff with you. Over to you, Taffy.
Thank you, Kyle. It's always a tough act to follow when you go first, because you set the bar so high. So just a reminder of certain things. I think there have been quite a few comments regarding the slides and the recording. I do believe that the content will be shared with you at the end of the 2 days. So those of you who are struggling with connectivity issues and sound and so on, do not despair. You will get the content. What I'm going to do is just to assist everybody with regards to bandwidth. I'm going to switch off my video so that I can get into my presentation. And then, yeah, we'll get started. So excuse me as I just switch off my video and switch into my presentation. Thank you. Right. I hope you can all see my slide or my presentation.
Yes, we can.
So, yeah, thank you. I think one of the key elements that Kyle spoke about was that being self-aware is really the beginning of the process. And once you're aware of yourself, at least you have a starting point. I want to continue the sort of the theme that Kyle has laid out in unpacking a few tools that will help you navigate this environment that we currently exist in. So the module that I'm going to take you through basically explores the interpersonal building block of emotional intelligence. And what we're hoping to do is to deepen your emotional intelligence toolkit in providing a few tools that will help you along the journey. First, we'll unpack empathy. Then we'll go into deep listening. We'll also just touch on social styles and the ability to be able to flex your style depending on the situation. And I'll finish off with positive acknowledgement. So how do we unpack interpersonal relationships, right? And what really are they? Now, these are defined as social connections or affiliations between two or more people. And this then means that these relationships are ever present in all facets of life, be it professional or personal. Now, they differ in varying levels of intimacy and sharing, implying that there has to be an establishment of a common ground. There must be a meeting of minds, a meeting place, and maybe centered on the various things that we share in common. I think even in our personal lives, you will have, a group of friends that you're able to talk sports a lot more about than others that you're able to talk, say, issues of politics and religion. And I think that defines that common ground, And what you also need to realize is that interpersonal relationships really refers to being able to develop and maintain mutually satisfying relationships. And that is the cornerstone of emotional intelligence. So as an individual, in order for you to be able to influence and relate to people better, you must be able to make sure that you get up to the pitch of the person that you are trying to create that relationship with. Right. Now, the question really is, how can I make interpersonal relationships work? And how can I make them effective? So in this age, of busy schedules and high pressure demands at work, tasks are really often the focus. You need to get things done. And as a result, relationships usually are placed at the back of our agendas. Everything is about get my stuff done. However, for real performance cultures, there needs to be a balance between getting things done and working effectively with colleagues, because no one is an island, and everybody has to work collaboratively. So this requires a focus on interpersonal relationships. And so a relationship basically equates to work, and developing and maintaining effective interpersonal relationships requires a skill and a tool which can which adds greatly to developing and maintaining interpersonal relationships is that of empathy. Now, this is a word that is used quite a lot. And I want to just sort of define it first, show you a video, and then we'll go further in terms of unpacking it. And the graphic that I've just shown you shows that empathy requires both heart and mind to work together in order to create a safe space for work colleagues, friends, and family. So Simon Sinek, who's a renowned motivational speaker and business leader, in this little clip that I'm going to show you emphasizes the importance of empathy in a work situation. Apologies, I'm told that there was there was no sound on that video. But basically what the video was talking to was a situation where a manager has to have a difficult conversation about performance with a staff member, a subordinate, or a colleague. And there are a couple of ways of approaching it, which is really, you know, the first instance was, you know, your numbers are down, you're not performing. If you don't pull up your socks, you know, something's going to happen. And an empathetic leader would still connect to the business side of the conversation, which is your numbers are down, you know, something's happening. It's the third consecutive month that your numbers have not been going up and they've been on a downward trajectory. And then they ask, is everything okay? Can I assist you? And it's just that minor change that allows, you know, the recipient of that question or of that message to feel that they're in a safe space and be able to articulate and also reach out for help if they need to. So empathy is the ability to recognize and understand and share thoughts and feelings of another person, animal, or fictional character. Developing empathy is crucial for establishing relationships and behaving compassionately. It involves experiencing another person's point of view rather than just one's own, and enables pro-social or helping behaviors that come from within rather than being forced. The main pillar of empathy is understanding, and understanding what the person is telling you and sensitively communicating your understanding. Being a good listener and responding with understanding allows that the other person, that you get into the other person's skin and seeing the world from their view and letting him or her know that you have understood what is being said. And this allows you to resonate with each other, you know, and with what the feeling is. In essence, you know, if you have empathy, you're able to walk in someone else's shoes. And this is a critical component of the interpersonal emotional intelligence, right? So basically, what we are trying to do here is getting everybody to be able to understand and relate to the problems that each and everyone is facing. And in order for you to do this, you must be able to listen. And communication, listening is a key component of the communication process. It is by communicating clearly and honestly that people are
that people connect with each other and establish collaborative relationships. And deep listening is an active process. So this includes questioning and an assessment of body language so that you're able to see whether the message that is being spoken is coming from deep within. And it involves mirroring the other person, and you have to demonstrate an interest. And from there is where your empathy comes out. And when one exhibits good deep listening skills, you're able to be fully present in your interactions with others and see the world from their perspective. John Keats describes deep listening as an ongoing practice of suspending your self-oriented reactive thinking and opening one's awareness to the unknown and unexpected. It calls on a special quality of attention that he calls negative capability. And it's the kind of listening that can help relieve the suffering of another person. What do we achieve by deep listening? And where does the power of deep listening come from? So it's a valuable social habit. I think that's the first thing. And it's something that we've got to do regularly, not just in a work situation, but also in a personal situation, because it is transformative communication tool. With deep listening, you're not only allowing yourself the time and space to fully absorb what your conversation partner is saying, you can actually encourage them. And once that encouragement comes, it allows them to fully open up and for them to feel and speak more openly. And this is the way, and this is the key step in developing rapport with the others. And once you build that rapport, you're able to then build on trust and goodwill. And once you have that, you're then able to get an understanding of what they're talking about. I'm going to share with you a few, just 4 tenets of what deep listening looks like in reality. So the first thing that we have to get right when we're in the process is eye contact. And by maintaining good eye contact, you're demonstrating to your conversation partner that you're fully engaged and interested in what he or she is saying. A good guideline to always follow in a conversation is the 80-20 rule, in which 80% of your time, your eyes are meeting your speaking partners, and 20% your eyes are roaming as you gather the information that is coming in and also how you're going to respond. Presence, right? The average person speaks between 135 and 160 words per minute, but our brains work at about double to 3 times that. So this means that your mind is going a lot faster than your conversation partner's mouth, which makes it easy for your mind to drift. And sometimes you're actually trying to then interfere and finish off sentences because your mind is already ahead and you think you know what they're going to say in the conversation. So it's really up to you as a participant in the conversation to stop your mind from shifting away from the conversation and to be truly present. Not only will you be fully in the moment, but you're able to absorb what your partner says. You'll be able to respond in kind, which makes them feel appreciated and understood. And then there's nonverbal feedback. And this is often very underestimated, and the impact, it's like when you walk into somebody's office, a lot of people say I have an open door policy, but sometimes you walk in there and the look that you get from the person sitting behind the desk tells you that you should go no further and literally turn on your heels and walk out. So it's the same with that conversation. There's nothing worse than speaking to someone who gives no verbal feedback. It's like talking to a wall. So you must make an effort to give the occasional nod, smile, or other sign of recognition to your conversation partner. These nonverbal cues may seem trivial, but they have a tremendous impact by showing your interest, understanding, and involvement in the conversation. when you're speaking one-on-one with somebody, position your body in a way that creates a safe and welcoming space for them to speak openly. Lean slightly in, open your chest, pull your shoulders back, and hold your hands gently on your lap or on the table in front of you. If you're standing, form a reversed hand steeple in which the fingers come together to form a point. When someone steeples in the lap area, it means they're confident about what they're hearing. And if you practice this, I know a lot of this sounds quite trivial and you probably think, yeah, but I do that all the time. But if you really make a conscious decision to have this in your conversations, you will find that you start improving the quality of your conversations. I also want to share with you a tool, a deep listening tool that you can also add onto this. Now, it's made of 6 simple steps, right? And the first step is the door opener. So let the speaker speak, let them in, right? And allow them to start having that conversation. The second step is you need to echo. And the reason why you need to echo what they're telling you is for clarity and understanding, and to show and to get onto the same page with the speaker that you've understood what they're saying. You also need to dig deeper, and this is called probing, just to try and make sure that you've got the correct context of the conversation that you're having. And once you've probed, you need to go back to making sure that you're also really aligned, and this is called checking in. This allows you to then move on to the next step, which is just capture their emotions. And this you do by reflecting and capturing the feelings, and then capture the content. You paraphrase. So always try and make sure that you paraphrase what you have heard. And this will, if you're able to paraphrase it, then it means that you have full understanding. And following these steps allows you to engage without assumptions, without judgment. It also allows you to establish trust by demonstrating that you value what the other person is saying and you take them seriously, right? It also allows you to cultivate an authentic connection with others. The quality of your attention influences the quality of the conversation. I will repeat that again. The quality of your attention influences the quality of the conversation. And once you've got that, clarity, I think, just comes naturally. And by following this, you will be able to train yourself to be able to listen better and participate in a more wholesome way in conversations. One of the things that Kyle mentioned was you can never take away your weakness. What you can do is, one, focus on your strength, but you can also try and improve on your weakness. It will never completely go away. So if you find yourself that you can't engage in conversation, this is a tool that you can actually use and just follow those 6 steps, the 4 tenets plus the 6 steps, and see if you do not improve the quality of your conversations. Right. The next tool that I'm going to try and unpack quickly, just watching the time, is the social styles, right? And this is a tool that is influenced by the work of 2 psychologists, David Merrill and Carl Jung. And it can be used for interacting interpersonally with increased emotional intelligence. So being aware of your social style can help you assess others' behaviors and help you to operate with greater emotional intelligence. An emotionally intelligent approach to interacting with people requires the user to then flex. So the model is based on 2 dimensions. One dimension is along a continuum of more assertive to less assertive. The other dimension of social styles is responsive to less responsive. And this is based on those who are expressive, analytical, the driver, and the amiable. And people have different styles. And these styles give us a window into the needs and wants. Now, the social style works hand in hand with the style flex. And this is a way of tailoring your behavior so that it fits better with a colleague, customer, or a leader style. Now, it's all about adapting in a way that makes it easy for someone to work with you. Again, it goes back to what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses? How can you navigate between those two opposite ends to make sure that the context of the conversation is what you're trying to flex your style to? The reality of our everyday lives is that our styles have to adapt to different situations and different people. If we have learned anything over the last 17 to 18 months, is that, you know, we have to adapt. We have to learn how to navigate, you know, the change that is coming. So those people who are able to flex their styles a lot more quickly will find themselves able to integrate into different situations much better and are able to have better relationships, interpersonal relationships with other individuals. So as you develop the interpersonal building block of emotional intelligence, right? We must always aspire towards effective interpersonal relationships. We must show empathy. We must listen deeply, and you know, we must be able to acknowledge people. So acknowledgement and positive acknowledgement is a very powerful way of motivating and demotivating people. You know, conversations where, you know, you get that positive encouragement, that positive motivation. This detracts from the creation of effective interpersonal relationship. And acknowledgement is any act which recognizes another person's presence and says, I see you, I know you were there, and I think what you're doing is great, right? And this positive acknowledgement leaves a person feeling good, alive, alert, and most of all, significant. People who give lots of positive strokes usually feel good and confident themselves. If you're able to hand out that positive acknowledgement to somebody else, you will definitely find that you feel good about yourself, because the joy that you see on the other person's face just gives you a bounce in your step. And that is a mark of emotional intelligence. Right. So, ladies and gentlemen, just to summarize, you know, this module just explored 4 building blocks: empathy, deep listening, and the social styles and the flexing, and the positive acknowledgement. What I will urge you to do is to reflect on your own interpersonal blueprint. We have given you the tools for you to go out and understand, you know, and become self-aware. And then you can then translate these new insights and tools into practical action to develop this emotional intelligence building block and drive towards high performance. Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen, for your time. I hope that you will be able to use what we have given you just to sort of try and build that emotional intelligence, and try it so that we can get some feedback when we come back tomorrow, in terms of, you know, when you're in the office, just pick a moment, pick a conversation, and try and use some of these tools and see what happens. And with that, I would like to hand over back to Sameera, and thank you once again for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Taffy. Thank you, Kyle, for such an informative session. From the chat box and the Q&A, I can see that the content really resonated with so many of you, and it really is our hope that the tools that we shared with you today are going to help you to practically apply these learnings in your life, in the workplace, and wherever you go. Before we end the session, I know that there were lots of questions coming through the chat about the eligibility of certificates of attendance. So if you've used a link or different logins, or you were affected by connectivity or load shedding, please just send an email to digit@regent.ac.za and confirm your attendance with the team there. I just also wanted to apologize for any challenges that you may have experienced in terms of the viewing of slides, in terms of listening to the audio as a result of connectivity, but the slides will be sent out to you via an email link after day 2. Word versions of the assessment will also be sent out by the Regent Business School team. So you can also just drop an email on digital@regent.ac.za and they will send you the Word version of the assessment. There were questions around whether or not people needed to submit those assessments back to us. It really is not necessary. The assessment is a self-evaluation. It's there for self-reflection, but what we will do tomorrow is just debrief the results of that assessment, and we will then give you the tools to be able to put together certain action plans in order to address those development areas that have been identified. To the attendees, thank you so much for your feedback, for your participation. We absolutely love the engagement. I think we've done a few of these webinars now, and never before have there been so many questions coming through. So we appreciate the engagement there. We really are looking forward to welcoming you back here tomorrow, same time, same place. Have a wonderful evening and good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.